Right Honorable Odinga, I think you're the special envoy for infrastructure. We have a joke where I work that even if you have the greatest broadband network, often you run into a bad road network when you're trying to move goods across countries. I know that you are working on the question of infrastructure, and one of the special projects of the Agenda 2063 is the high-speed train network. So can you tell us a little bit about that? It's a kind of a Wakanda-style dream for the moment, but what's happening to make it come to life?
Thank you very much. I want to begin also by thanking the organizers of this conference for inviting us to come here. Secondly, I want to congratulate President Paul Kagame for the inspirational role that he's been playing on this continent. And also for challenging Africans. I remember recently he said that Africans should own their problems, seek solutions to those problems, and write their own stories. And I couldn't agree more with him, because as this old saying goes, until the lion learns to write, the story of the hunt will always favor the hunter. So the African lion needs to write its own story. And this is very crucial. The founding fathers of the African continent really wanted African unity. Remember, Kwame Nkrumah said that Africa will not be free until every inch of the continent is liberated. And a lot was spent in the struggle for the total liberation of the African continent. At that time also they were talking about the African unity. But of course, over 50 years later, we are still here where we are. We are still with the colonial boundaries that were drawn in Berlin, where no African was represented. But that's a challenge and a subject for another day. But now, it is here in Kigali where the African leaders came as a result of realization that Africa was really trading very late with itself, and that there is need to break some of these barriers and facilitate more intra-African trade. This again was inspired by President Paul Kagame. Now, but how does Africa trade with itself? One of the impediments is lack of proper infrastructure. And I usually give the example of Kenya on East Africa and Central African Republic. It's only a stone's throw away from Kenya. Only South Sudan is between Kenya and Central African Republic. But how do Kenyan goods reach there? To export Kenyan coffee to Bangui, you need a ship that will go around the Cape and up the western coast, up to Cameroonian port of Douala or Kribi, and then by road all the way back to Bangui. The French are there much earlier than you. And that's why they are drinking Kenyan coffee there, christened as Nescafe. Or they drink Kenyan tea there, known as English breakfast tea. So, lack of infrastructure. And that is why the African Union, through the agency of NEPAD, came up with the infrastructure development that will link Africa. And here we have not only the high-speed railway that you're talking about, but first the continental highways. And then we're also talking about the waterways. And then you're talking about the open skies, the air transport in the continent, and finally, the high-speed railway network. Right now, we have about 9 intercontinental trans-African highways that have been identified for development. The Cape to Cairo, the Tripoli to the Cape, Dakar, Cairo to Dakar, Dakar to Lagos, Dakar, N'Djamena, then N'Djamena to Djibouti, Lagos to Mombasa, to mention just some of them. And then there is, of course, the continental high-speed railway network, which will help the transportation of goods across the continent. Because right now, the cost of transport within the continent of Africa is between 50 to 175% higher than the rest of the world. And that's what makes it very difficult for intra-African trade. So these railway networks have been conceived to link the continents. You have one running from Lagos through Kano, eventually going to N'Djamena in Chad. The one would run from Beira, port coming through Harare into Lusaka, along Benguela line to Huambo in Angola. Then we have got the Trans-African Beltway, which runs from the port of Lamu in Kenya, branching to one to Addis Ababa, and the other one to Juba in South Sudan. And from there, that's phase 1. Phase 2 going from Juba through Bangui in Central African Republic to Yaoundé up to the Cameroonian port of Kribi, creating a land bridge linking the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean and opening the interior of the continent to trade. Several landlocked countries then will be able to hook on. Chad can hook on, Uganda, DRC, the Republic of Congo, of course Nigeria, and so on. So you can have goods coming from east to west and west to east. So all the imports coming from Europe will come and be to the Cameroonian port of Kribi, and then will be then transported across the continent. And those coming from Asia, from Japan, China, and so on, come to the port of Lamu and transported across the continent. That way, it will be easier for imports and also intra-African trade. Ethiopia has just completed a railway line from Djibouti to Addis Ababa. She will connect with the Lapset all the way to the port of Lamu in Kenya. But then, another issue here is how do you construct the high-speed railway line without power, energy? And that is why we are now also talking about energy across the continent. And that is how the Inga Dam in DRC becomes a priority in the continent. The Inga is has got the biggest hydroelectric potential in the world. Right now, the studies show that you can generate up to 110,000 megawatts from Inga. The DRC's requirement will be 10,000, at most 20,000. So therefore, it cannot be a national project. It must be developed as a regional, a continental project. And that's why we're saying that this is a major priority that we want to take off almost immediately. There are regional power pools, the Southern African power pool, the Eastern African power pool, the Central African, the Western African, and Northern African. We are now talking about regional interconnections so that you can then interconnect the entire continent and have this energy distributed and available at a much cheaper rate. Some countries, like in Liberia, the cost of energy is about 35 cents per unit. You cannot hope to develop in that kind of rate of power. So you need to find a way where you can get cheap power. This will enable Africa also to add value, to value addition to raw materials that's abundant on this continent. Africa, the richest continent in terms of resources, yet Africa's living conditions are also the poorest. This paradox is what we want to resolve, so that instead of exporting iron ore, we'll be exporting steel. Instead of exporting copper, we'll be exporting copper cables. Instead of exporting bauxite, we'll be exporting aluminum, finished goods, or sheets, or channels. Most of the raw materials will leave this continent as processed products, and that will create jobs for the millions of the African youth who are impatient right now, are unemployed.
Thank you.
We want the African land to roar, and we ensure this is the time for the African land to give a message to the Asian tiger. Thank you.
I think the question that's difficult to answer here is, how do we do that within our political systems? And I want for all of the panelists to hold that question when they're finishing off later, to explain how we make sure that these important projects are not stopped by regional and geopolitical issues. But I'll keep that for later. I'm going to give the hardest question to the woman in the room, because that's what we do. We answer hard questions. No pressure. So we were studying at the Next Science Forum how to develop without protecting industries. We look at the big companies that have been able to go across the continent and been very successful, have been protected. And I know that you have been working with the EU and other partners on a lot of digital economy projects to be able to spur African economies forward. And the question of digital infrastructure is another question. But how do we make sure that we're moving within the digital economy to creating industries that will be able to employ the 10 million young people that come onto the market every year? So that's a tough question, and I'll give you a little bit more time to reflect on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to maybe start by thanking the Kusi Ideas Festival for inviting me here, the Aga Khan Nation Media Group, and of course, Your Excellency, President Kagame. I think two things I would start with, and then I'll add a third in the end. The first is ideas. And we have, as a continent, I think, to be the continent of ideas. And that means in 60 years, and I'll link this to your question, in 60 years, we must be the continent that delivers ideas for the world. We must be the continent that delivers a prosperous world with our ideas. When we talk about the CFTA, essentially we're talking about trading ideas. Today, Africa's share of world trade is 3%. It means essentially that we have 3% of the ideas of the world. A prosperous Africa in 60 years cannot be a 3% ideas Africa. So the first thing that we will have to do, I think, is have Makerere University be the center where we start sending people back to the moon. And I see that as something that we can achieve in 60 years, and have maybe a woman from Makerere University be the one who lands a spaceship in the moon, maybe not in 30 years, but sooner. So I think that first is the most important. We will stop going to MIT and Harvard, or we will have MIT and Harvard come to Cape Town University and see Carlos, or go to the University of Boya, where we have artificial intelligence. But we do need to create a knowledge economy, first of all. And I think that is the essence of the CFTA. When you look at the data, when we do not buy from each other, it means we are not buying each other's ideas. When trade is at 3%, If the ECOWAS trades at 12% intra-African trade, it means that we only value each other's ideas by 12%. And so that is going to be a really important part of it. And that links to the very critical question you've asked about how you ensure that you can protect the ideas and the technology. I think as we leap into the fourth industrial revolution, and I was just talking with the patron of the fourth industrial revolution for our continent, Strive, who is here with me today, and we were saying that, you know, we talk a lot about the fourth industrial revolution, but you need the information, you need the ideas, but as well you need the policy environment to be able to make that happen. A critical issue around the policy environment is going to be, first of all, that our countries legislate that there is a sense of usage or interoperability, so that somebody in Algeria can talk very seamlessly to somebody in Rwanda or to somebody in Zimbabwe on the same platforms. And I think that what the CFTA is doing as part of its accompanying infrastructure is providing that platform. And we hope that when the leaders meet in February, they will be able to endorse what we're calling the digital strategy for the continent, which would allow for interoperability. In terms of protection, I think something very interesting. I was talking with the CEO of Mara, and Mara is the first phone that is being produced on the continent, and it's being produced in Rwanda and South Africa. So we have to, I think when we talk about going to the moon, we're already producing phones here. But the glass screen on the Mara phone is from Dow Corning Chemicals. I don't know how many people know Dow Corning Chemicals, but they have the intellectual property right for that glass screen. They've had this IP for almost the last 30 years. It is the best in the world. So even as we make the phone on the continent, we still bring that input from external, from outside the continent. We can actually produce that here. They cannot yet get cobalt from DRC. Unfortunately, President Tshisekedi, we need you to give us the Inga Dam, we need you to give us cobalt, we probably need you to feed us. So we're giving you a lot of work, but that is, I think, the importance of what the continent can do. And I think in that space, we do need to begin to develop this property rights protection. So it's not so much protecting industry as it is protecting the assets of industry, as it is ensuring that industries are productive. And I think that when we start looking at, you know, how do you lay the cables? What is the facilitation and the investment process that you need to put in place for the investment that we need to happen? Then we start talking about improving the doing business environment. Again, Rwanda is a leader in that. DRC has also been a leader in the doing business and continues to be. Africa is in the top 10 countries. I think this year, Togo went up 40 points in doing business. So we're getting there. So I think when people talk about protecting industry, I think what we first need to do is start by protecting the environment in which business exists and business performs. If we do that, we have gone 60% in protecting industry. Now, the second part about how do we protect our local industry is essentially buying ideas. If we rather buy a drug because it's called X from India as opposed to buying the generic from Kenya, we are voting not to protect our industries and not to create those jobs. So again, I think that what the CFTA is doing is saying, when we talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, we're actually saying, not that we don't want to trade with the rest of the world, but that first we want to build a supply chain within the continent that will allow us to capitalize and leverage on what is happening across the continent and then take it out. And as we do that, and I think an area where most of us in the room, as President Kagame was saying, maybe we will all be existing again in the next 60 years. Just recently, a new technology was developed which allows us to be able to bring back the smell of flowers that are extinct. This is being done in laboratories in California. And we also know that even in Guinea-Bissau, there are now scientists that are figuring out how to cure malaria at much cheaper rates. So California is figuring out how to bring back the scent of flowers. This is really great. Guinea-Bissau is figuring out how to cure malaria. And I think that gives you a sense, first of all, of the importance of technology, but of the fact that we're already doing amazing things on the continent and we can do better. But then we need to, first of all, value what we're doing ourselves. Again, that is protecting industry. But the third part of that question is the second segment of the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is going to be dealing with competition policy, intellectual property rights, and e-commerce trade. And I think that when we put those things together, again, the leaders have to come together as they have come together in the CFTA to say, what kind of competition policy do we need across the continent to ensure that we can actually deliver for the jobs that we need? What kind of industrial policy do we need? Europe today has just gotten together and created one intellectual property rights agency, so that we can ensure that we protect the knowledge and the ideas of the continent. Maybe as we go forward, this is what we need to do. And finally, all of that will not be able to happen if I think we don't have a confluence of three things. That is peace, governance, and leadership. And I think on the peace side, we cannot but be happy. In 2 days, we're going to be, the Nobel Prize for Peace is going to go to an African. And I think that this is another step forward. The Prime Minister of Ethiopia, of course, is going to be getting the Nobel Peace Prize. But we are still far away from getting a peaceful continent. And I think we do need to get that peaceful continent. One way of getting that peaceful continent will clearly be that we probably need a few more women in leadership, maybe a lot more. But we do need a few more women in leadership. And the governance of it, I don't think you need that much to protect industry if you have good governance. And we cannot build an Africa in 60 years that puts a man on the moon, that makes Makerere University the university of reference, or the University of Sudan the university of reference for the world, if we do not have the right governance frameworks to put that in place. And I think with the CFTA, for infrastructure, for education, for science, that is what the CFTA is hoping, and that is how we will create the jobs. In the United States, they just announced 110 months of zero unemployment, 110 months. It is about ideas, because the United States today is the marketplace for ideas. So I am fully convinced that with the kind of youth that we have, 110 months of unemployment in our continent in 60 years will be the norm.
Thank you. So before we go to our audience, because we want to have some interaction and some comments and questions from the audience, I want to ask President Kagame, you're constantly about leadership yourself. And I think one of the things that has set Rwanda apart is that citizens consider themselves shareholders. And by a shareholder, that means you invest your time, your money. It's not just the person leading that is responsible for the well-being of this country. So how do we get that? How has that helped Rwanda move forward, and how do we make sure, I know that you don't like giving advice to other African countries, but how has this helped Rwanda, and how can we make sure African citizens are shareholder in the development of the continent?
There is no magic wand in this. I just say, in our case, the progress that has been made can be referenced on the simple fact that, yes, we put people at the center of everything we are doing, meaning rally people together around a common cause, and that is their stability, their development, and of course there has to be a vision they contribute to and participate in making sure that they get to where they want to be. And, well, I'm saying this, it's simple really to say it, to define everything you want. It's very simple. The most difficult thing is having it done and seeing the outcomes of that, and therefore moving in the direction people have said they want to see happen. So it's rallying people around a common cause, understanding of what the challenges are that they have to deal with. That necessitates having a clear vision in which they have participated and contributed to. And inevitably, the third is that elephant in the room, which is called leadership. The leadership makes sure that these things come all together to give people what they want. So we've, in our case, the modest progress that is made here in Rwanda, we can look back and say it's because some of it by luck, some of it, but luck seems to go where people are trying something. When you are trying something, then luck comes your way. So I think, so we've been trying really to make sure that we understand our problems, we take responsibility for them, we do our best, but always bring in people, let people be part of it, and explain to them. We've told the people, every part of communication we try to do as leaders in this country has been simplified. People have to understand what you're talking about. You put it in the simplest language, their own language, and then relate that to their own needs in the basic life they live. And once you succeed with one project or with one step, the rest keep coming. And all you need to do is how fast you move. But I think it happens that way. So people, vision, leaders, and but maybe something else. You have to believe that your place is up there, not here. Yes, people have to believe that, and they have to believe they have in themselves what really is required. Even if you have a small part to play, somebody else plays another small part, together it becomes a big thing. So this is the way we think it has worked, and maybe should work for us. And for others, I'm sure maybe they have done it the same way or differently, but if we keep working together as Africans, I think we can find ourselves making very good progress.
Thank you. So I know I had a comment from Achaleke, who's a senior partner and chairman of McKinsey Africa. As President Kagame likes to say, we have to make sure Africa is sitting at the negotiation table, not on the menu. So Acha, do you have something to say in this?
Thank you very much for that opportunity, and thanks to the Nation Media Group for putting this together. Yes, I do have something to say. I was thinking about the next 60 years, and I am equally excited. I'm a bit younger than some of the people on the panel, so I hope I'll still be here in the next 60 years, but I'm excited for a number of reasons. I'm excited because I know the chairman of the Nation Media Group spoke about, today we're 1.2 billion Africans, so 1 out of every 6 in the world citizen is African. By 2050, we'll be 2.5 billion, 1 out of every 4. By the turn of the century, we'll be 4 billion, 1 out of every 3, right? So if you add, 60 years, that's about 2079. We'll be roughly 30% of the world's population in Africa. Just imagine that, 30% of the world population. Now, what does that then mean, right? That means, one, we can be the labor force for the world, right? Where will all the nurses and the doctors and the mechanics and, labor-intensive manufacturing come from? It'll have to come from here. In addition to that, that means we'll have to, we are going to feed the world. We have 60% of the unused arable land in Africa, plus 30% of the population, right? We're going to have to feed ourselves and feed the rest of the world. Again, huge opportunities. So that's on one dimension. On the other dimension, you think of the consumer market, right? It'll be a massive consumer market. 30% of the population will be here, and that's where the growth is going to come from. I always remember, I know the Attorney General from Nigeria is here. There are more babies born in Nigeria every year today than in the whole of Western Europe. So if you're a diapers company, a baby foods company, where is your growth going to come from, right? So this is where the market is going to be. Now, I think we've spoken a lot about the opportunity to realize that, there are some things we're going to have to do differently, right? One, we're going to have to educate people very differently, right? We need to really scale up education and be very innovative to make sure that, all these people who are coming into the labor force are actually educated. We're going to have to create employment, right? So we'll have to link education to employment, but I think more importantly, we're going to have to create entrepreneurs. We will never, as private sector or as even public sector, be able to create enough jobs for everybody coming to the labor force. So I think, a big push on entrepreneurship and really helping people become entrepreneurs, giving them the skills, also the financing they need to start businesses for themselves and to scale those businesses and employ others. And the third thing for me is, I think what the panel talked about is we'll have to be a bigger market. We cannot operate as 54, 55 countries when we're that scale, right? We'll have to be one Africa, and hopefully CFTA will be full interaction by then. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. I think how we plan and structure so we make sure that we're capitalizing on this market. I'm going to invite Mr. Strive Masiwa to give us a couple of comments. He's the founder and chairman of Econet. And I think yesterday you were speaking to young entrepreneurs here in Rwanda, and I thought the thoughts around scaling innovation and startups quickly, making sure that we are finding new innovative financing instruments. I know that maybe not what you're saying right now, but I want to invite you to share a few thoughts.
Thank you. Well, it's always an honor and a privilege to be here. And as you say, I had a great honor yesterday to share a platform with President Kagame before young Rwandese entrepreneurs. And that's where I really would want to start my remarks. I think one of the key factors for us in the next 60 years is the growing appreciation of the role of entrepreneurs. Because yes, we talk about the United States, for instance, with its railway networks, but they were built by entrepreneurs. They were built by entrepreneurs. They built power stations. So African entrepreneurs will be able to do that as well. So it was exciting to see the young people. I'm also excited because of the type of leadership. That's what gives me a great optimism. I build digital infrastructure, and I look at the leaders on the platform, and each one of them has caught into our vision for digital infrastructure. I remember coming to Rwanda and President Kagame saying to me, "So you have built a fiber network all the way from South Africa." I said, "Yes." He said, "What would you like to do?" I said, "I want to get to Cape Town, to Cairo." And he said, "Okay, how can I help you?" And so he started to make phone calls, and during his tenure as the head of the African Union, we completed Cape to Cairo by fiber. And the new chair of the African Union, not to be left behind, he called me one day. We sat in his office. He said, "What about West Africa? How can I help you to get to West Africa?" I said, "Can you help me go from Port Sudan, Chad, to Nigeria?" And we did it. We are now in Cameroon. I'm stuck in Cameroon. And she said, "We'll sort you out in Cameroon." So we expect in the next few months to reach Cameroon. But at the same time, we need to build digital infrastructure through the Congo. Who can build through the Congo? We always dreamt of going through the Congo. And as soon as President Tshisekedi came in, we went with President Kagame, called him, we went to see him. We are now building through the DRC. We've built from Lubumbashi all the way. We're at Inga Dam. Now we are 37 kilometers from the border with Angola. We expect to reach Rwanda by February. That will take us east to west. So we have to build digital infrastructure along a lot of other infrastructure so the private sector can play a role. You can trust us to build the big things. I'm always at the door of the High Commissioner here for infrastructure. He knows, him and I have been talking about my needs for digital infrastructure. So the private sector can play a role. We can mobilize capital. We've just been talking about what the private sector could do to help build Inga Dam. So trust us for that. We want to be your partners to build the infrastructure for Africa as Africans. This is the future, and we have to help our young people to be confident and ready to build, because it is their century. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's an important point, and I also think innovation ecosystems need to talk to each other as part of this new customs union that we're building. So as going forward, we're going to take 3 questions from the floor. After that, we're going to hear some responses, and if we have some time, we'll take some more questions. So I'm going to ask the 3 people who had submitted their questions in advance: Nasim Devji, CEO of DTB, Diana Mulili, who you've been seeing beautifully on the screen, CEO of Msingi, and Nasikiwa Beria of Barclays Bank, Tanzania. We're going to take your 3 questions, take some responses, and then we're going to go back again to the audience. So can we have Nasim stand up and give her question? Yes.
Good evening. Thank you. My question is for His Excellency President Kagame. Before I start my question, I would like to take this opportunity, Your Excellency, to say Asante Sana. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for welcoming us to this beautiful, beautiful country of yours. Thank you again. My question is as follows. A lot of thinking and action about African integration and open borders focuses on trade, on movement, and infrastructure. How do we move to things like pooling resources for research and development, working together on climate science? Is our view of African cooperation narrow?
Thank you. Diana?
Thank you, and good evening. My question is to Dr. Vera Songwe. In the development conversation about Africa, there are several voices who say the continent should not focus on industrialization, that indeed Africa won't achieve prosperity through industrialization, but instead invest big in agriculture. I'd like to know your opinion on this, and what do you think are the building blocks that we should focus on? Thank you.
Thank you. Beria, I hope I'm saying that well. Nasikiwa Beria.
Good evening. My question goes to His Excellency, President of Democratic Republic of Congo. So with over 12.9 million inhabitants, and Kinshasa being one of the French-speaking cities, do you think spearheading Paris with 10.1 million speakers, do you think this is a problem? And do you also think that French will be shifting to DRC and Africa in general? Thank you.
Okay, very interesting question there. So we'll start with President Kagame responding to the first question.
Well, continental free trade agreement we have reached as Africans, and the area we are creating should not be all about integration. Trade is very important in and of itself. We want to see Africans trading with one another, but we don't and should not stop there. In fact, the integration part we are looking at also is much broader than that. In fact, some of the things you've mentioned, whether it is in research or, well, let me give you a quick example. Trade stands out, is talked about by everybody. It benefits people visibly, real time. But one example that is also important, which we could do on a much bigger scale, for example, we have an education institution here. Say we have a university from the United States that has set up its campus here in Rwanda, Carnegie Mellon. And what we did initially when it was coming, it was a discussion between Rwanda and Carnegie Mellon. But as it developed, we said, well, this actually should serve Africans. It shouldn't just be Rwanda benefiting from Carnegie Mellon. We want to have students from across Africa. And that's what is happening. So that is bringing Africans together. We are having many young people. Yes. The other day we were opening their campus, and we were having even a discussion with the students. In fact, I was being interviewed by a young man from Ghana, and the others were telling me they're from Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, and went on and on and on. We had about 11 countries having young people studying there. And they were also in their discussion talking about not the good quality education they are getting from the institution. They have gone beyond that. They were making mention of the fact that it is important they come from different parts of the continent. So that is one way of bringing the Africans together. It's about education, it's about anything else. And so our idea of integration and issues around CFTA are not narrow. We want it to be much bigger than that. We want to build on that. We want more than that. So I think you are very right to actually bring it up so that it is clear, because in most instances it isn't very clear to everyone. People may think that trade is just about, selling, but there are many other things associated with that. For example, free movement of people. When you're talking about trade, you're talking about movements of people, movement of goods, and as Honorable Raila earlier on said, it's about infrastructure that connect one country to another and things like that. So it's trade, but behind the trade, so many other important things are happening and should happen. But we need to bring it out very clearly. In fact, sometimes people don't even see this, and that's why they think when you're talking about integration, it's just one thing or another. So we need to understand the depth and breadth of it all. So it's up to us again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sangwe.
Thank you. Now, I see Agnes Kalibata here, Minister of Agriculture. If you go back maybe 10 years, 2008, 2007, Rwanda at the time was a net importer of rice, food. And today, I think Rwanda has already met its rice needs and is exporting rice. And the answer to your question then is, we do need to do agriculture, industrialization, and services. The GDP of Africa today, 51% is services. Services is essentially ideas again, but a lot trade, logistics, and I think that is where the CFTA begins to power the whole sort of process of where does growth come from. I think we say that no continent has ever developed without being able to feed itself. So we do need to feed ourselves, but as we develop, agriculture will become a lesser share of our GDP by definition. Now I think the big conversation that we see in the world today is between the US and China. And interestingly enough, it's not so much about industrialization, it is about ideas. It is about who can deliver the next 5G or the next 6G much faster than the other. And again, to be able to produce, you have to have the idea. And then you do the production of it. It's the good is a translation into hard fact of the idea. And I think that we shouldn't get hung up about whether it's food first or whether it's industrialization first or it's ideas first. The bottom line is we do need a prosperous continent, and it is going to be a combination of all of that. I think the power of the CFTA is that it allows us, and the Economic Commission for Africa is doing that, is saying, in what geography, in what jurisdiction do we have the best comparative advantage? In DRC, let's do energy because we can power the continent. Maybe in Kenya and Rwanda, let's do ICT and infrastructure because that is where the infrastructure is ready to deliver the ideas and transport them. In Nigeria, let's do Nollywood. It is now today the largest employer in Nigeria. So I don't think we should get hung up with what is it that we start doing, but we must deliver the infrastructure. Because for every one of those things that we have spoken about, whether it's agriculture, 25% of agriculture is energy, 40% of ICT is energy, and so everything we do requires some basic infrastructure, and I think we do need to start from there as the base, and then see where we go as we move forward.
Thank you. Je crois que la question pour le président Tshisekedi est à l'envers. Je crois que si Kinshasa en 2080 sera le grand mégapole du monde, on va devoir apprendre le lingala, pas le français. Mais je vais vous laisser répondre à cette question.
Bien, merci pour la question. Kinshasa, c'est vrai, c'est 12 millions d'habitants, un peu plus peut-être même en ce moment. Mais le Congo, c'est plus de 80 millions d'habitants et c'est 80 millions de francophones. Bien entendu, c'est un pays qui fait partie de la francophonie et en tant que tel, nous avons le devoir, la mission de promouvoir la langue française. Nous sommes le premier pays francophone au monde et cette position nous permet évidemment de le faire. Oui, je crois que lorsque nous allons davantage accentuer nos échanges en Afrique, entre pays africains, la langue française sera aussi promue, il y aura une promotion de celle-ci. Bien que je crois que les langues ne doivent pas être une barrière, et l'exemple du Rwanda d'ailleurs nous le démontre, le fait d'être devenu un pays bilingue a énormément facilité beaucoup de choses ici. Et je pense aussi que demain le Congo, en plus du français qu'il va promouvoir, devra aussi avoir d'autres langues. Je pense à la langue swahili par exemple, qui est une langue africaine là, et qui pourrait servir de véhicule entre nos cultures. Parce que, comme l'a dit le président Kagame, il n'y a pas que l'échange économique, commercial, il y a aussi l'échange culturel et les langues en font partie. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Je crois que, Your Excellency, if you accept, we want to take one more question from the audience. Your Excellency President Kagame. Yes, great. I know the front row is privileged, so I'll take this question here, and the hand that's in the back, that's two. I apologize.
Your Excellencies, let me stand on the well-established protocol. My name is Abubakar Malami. I'm here in representative capacity representing the President of the Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari. I have listened with very keen interest fundamentally on the way forward as it relates to the Africa, the next 60 years in Africa. Arising from the deliberations and discussions, we have identified knowledge economy, artificial intelligence, and delivery of ideas as answers in African development, of course with particular reference to a support by policy environment. But to my mind, I think there are major challenges that constitute a major hindrance to the African integration and indeed having in place a policy environment that can allow for flourishing of integration in Africa. The issue of corruption is a serious setback. Prevailing conflicts within the continent is equally a major setback. If we are talking of infrastructure, for example, infrastructure passing through Nigeria, Chad, perhaps down to Southern Sudan, for example, a lot of belt of conflicts along the way. So if you are talking of road infrastructure, for example, something that could have been concluded within a year might take 10, 20, 15 years, arising from the impossibility of penetration of the infrastructural development along the belt. If you are talking of corruption in its own right as well, an infrastructural development that might cost $1 billion could arise from the multiplicity of corruption, chain of corruption along the line might cost much more. So what are we doing in terms of addressing this? I think these are the major components that could constitute a major impediment to the realization of the issues relating to the delivery of ideas, artificial intelligence, and indeed knowledge economy coupled with the infrastructural development. We must never underrate the negative effect of corruption and indeed the prevailing conflict situation that is prevalent within the African continent. I think they are major issues for consideration.
Thank you. We're going to take one final question, the young lady who had her hand there, and then we'll hear from our panelists as they close.
Hello, everyone. My name is Agasaro Natasha, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for inviting our school here. My question goes to His Excellency Paul Kagame, and it goes, so as controversial as it could be, you are literally the man behind Rwanda's growth. And even though it is controversial, your leadership style has been the reason behind it. Now my question is, how and what leadership style would you recommend to help fathom this, the next 6 years in Africa, to make sure that this, that it happens faster, and what leadership style do you think is going to be most effective? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So before President Kagame answers that very important question, I would like to ask Son Excellence Moussa Faki sur la question de la corruption et and the silencing of the guns. On vient de parler de ça. Je crois que tout le monde sur le panel peut parler de ça, mais j'aimerais que vous commenciez à répondre sur ça. Comment répondre à la question de la corruption? Deuxièmement, comment we silence the guns? Ça, c'est la question.
Merci. Je voudrais rappeler que ici, on se projette pour les 60 prochaines années. Déjà au niveau de l'Union africaine, dans le cadre de l'agenda 2063, c'était à l'occasion du 50e anniversaire de l'OUA, un agenda a été rendu public et qui est une projection sur les 50 prochaines années. C'est vrai, ici on dépasse de 17 ans encore. Qu'est-ce qui est retenu dans cet agenda? Une Afrique intégrée. L'intégration, elle est physique, il faut des infrastructures, comme l'a dit le Premier ministre Raila Odinga'S. Elle est par les nouvelles technologies, comme l'a dit Strive. Elle est par l'énergie, elle est par le commerce, elle est par l'innovation, elle est par le brassage des étudiants, que ce soit à Kigali, à Lagos ou à Dar es Salaam. Une Afrique prospère, la prospérité n'est que le résultat d'une situation d'intégration où on met ensemble tout notre potentiel pour pouvoir la réussir. Le troisième axe qui a été retenu, c'est qu'une Afrique en paix. Cela me ramène à la question du thème qui va être en 2020, qui est celui des terres les armes en 2020. L'année précédente, le thème retenu par l'Union africaine, c'est la lutte contre la corruption. Et le président Muhammadu Buhari, le président du Nigeria, a été désigné par ses pairs comme le champion dans la lutte contre la corruption. La corruption est un phénomène extrêmement grave, surtout dans un contexte comme celui de l'Afrique. Il est lié également à la fuite des capitaux du continent africain vers l'extérieur. Une étude faite en 2015 dans un groupe présidé par le président Thabo Mbeki parlait déjà d'au moins 50 milliards de dollars fuient le continent africain chaque année pour aller à l'extérieur. Ce qui dépasse largement l'aide au développement. Donc la question de la corruption est une préoccupation majeure. Les marchés publics, la fonction publique, toutes les transactions dans la plupart des pays sont touchées par ces phénomènes. C'est vrai, nous avons une stratégie au niveau du continent africain sur la lutte contre la corruption, mais force est de reconnaître que le problème est prégnant, il est extrêmement présent. Et quand on veut construire une route qui va coûter 100 millions de dollars alors qu'avec la corruption, elle va être à 3 fois plus chère, naturellement, ça impacte négativement tout espoir de développement. Taire les armes, c'est un objectif très ambitieux. C'est parmi également les projets phares de l'Union africaine. De manière volontariste, on a pensé pouvoir taire les armes à l'horizon 2020. Nous sommes en 2020 dans quelques jours. C'est vrai qu'il n'y a plus de conflit entre États africains. Mais l'Afrique est malheureusement devenue également un sanctuaire de groupes terroristes, des extrémistes violents et de la criminalité transfrontalière qui remettent en cause dans le Sahel, en Libye, autour du bassin du lac Tchad, en Somalie et même en RDC, il y a des forces qui déstabilisent les États. Et ça, c'est un plaidoyer aujourd'hui qui est sur la table des Nations Unies. On leur a dit qu'il y a une coalition pour lutter contre l'État islamique, par exemple en Irak et en Syrie. Nous avons affaire au terrorisme, qui est une menace à la paix et à la sécurité mondiale. Nous aurions souhaité, nous, Africains, qu'avec l'ensemble de la communauté internationale, qu'on fasse une coalition pour lutter contre ces phénomènes qui n'a pas de frontières, qui n'a pas de nationalité et qui est une menace générale. Mais le tout est lié, la corruption, tout est lié à la question de la gouvernance. C'est le fond du problème. Et là, le leadership joue un rôle fondamental. Quel est le leadership idéal aujourd'hui pour le continent africain? Ça, c'est une question fondamentale. Il y a des modèles qui, pour certains, ont été hérités de notre histoire. Est-ce que c'est le meilleur modèle qu'il faut pour l'Afrique? Moi, je crois que de manière pragmatique, aujourd'hui, un leadership comme celui du Rwanda, ce n'est pas parce que je suis à côté du président Kagame, a fait ses preuves. Il a fait ses preuves et aujourd'hui, c'est le résultat qui compte. Je crois que les peuples ont une mémoire très claire. Quand ils voient de la différence sur leur quotidien, c'est ça qu'ils veulent. Donc il faut avoir une vision, un engagement, donc une conviction et des actes concrets qui parlent d'eux-mêmes. C'est ça en réalité la finalité. Merci.
Je crois qu'on le voit déjà aussi en RDC dans quelques mois, la différence que ça fait à l'Est. But President Kagame, the question was asked to you. I think you don't like this question, but it's an important question. How can we copy your leadership style and multiply it across the continent?
I first didn't understand the question because I didn't understand why it was controversial. But let me share with you something I learned over the years. I was reading somewhere, or it's a friend who told me, because in my earlier years when I was having to answer too many questions every day about me, about everything else, and so on, somebody told me, I think, that, you know, when you go into an interview room and you don't know what difficult questions that are going to be put to you, just go in thinking about the answers you want to give the interviewer, even without knowing the question. So sometimes you give the answer you want, even if you didn't understand the question. But let me tell you on this one, first, the growth that constantly the country has registered, which we are very happy about. And by the way, we ensure that, and it's always being discussed among ourselves, the leaders, the citizens of this country, we want it to be an inclusive growth. We want to make sure that more people benefit from that than those that do not. You don't have a perfect situation, so we may not have everybody benefiting as they should, but we want most of the people to benefit as they should. So the leadership style is, I think, so to speak, in my view, again, simple, and that's what we want, and have practiced over the years. It is to try and see accountability, first and foremost. As a leader at any level, the task must be, well, indeed, to lead. You lead people in doing things that benefit them and allow them to be better in their lives, in their living standards. But you want to make sure that also people are doing the right thing and they are not trying to benefit themselves at the expense of the others. So you try to bring some level of accountability to ensure that. So the style is around that. Are we together? Do we understand the challenge? Can we work together to find a solution? In the process, we should hold each other accountable, and then we proceed.
Thank you. So to close off this panel, I'm going to give each panelist 30 seconds to envision the next 60 years, or until 2063. I'm going to start with the Dr. Songwe in the order in which they were called. 30 seconds, I hope we can do it.
Merci, je vais parler en français cette fois-ci. Il y a 50 ans, les États-Unis ont mis quelqu'un sur la Lune. J'imagine et j'espère que d'ici 20 ans, quand nous reviendrons ici, un de jeunes qui est dans cette salle serait quelqu'un qui va nous remettre dans la Lune. Rappelons-nous qu'il y a deux choses qui ont engendré le progrès dans le monde. C'est les guerres et la vision et le rêve. Quelqu'un un jour a eu le rêve de dire on va mettre quelqu'un dans la Lune, il l'a fait. Donc pour vous les jeunes aujourd'hui, ne rêvez pas sur 60 ans, rêvez sur 10 ans, visionnez et croyez en vos rêves.
Thank you. Right Honorable Odinga.
Well, the Americans went to the moon a long time ago. I think in the next 60 years, Africa should not be thinking about the Mars. We should be thinking of going to the other galaxy rather than this one that we will have conquered. I believe that we want to move towards uniting Africa in 60 years. First begin with regional integration, not just economically, but political integration, uniting these countries, removing these unnecessary barriers. Here now, today we are in Kigali, we are using franc. In Kinshasa again, we are using franc. In Uganda, there's Uganda shilling, Tanzania shilling, Kenya shilling. Before the British left, there was only one East African shilling. But the French and the Belgians abandoned the franc and went to the euro. Yet now euro is still now in Rwanda and in DRC and the CFAs. We want to really unite these countries politically and economically. Finally, I mentioned about the African lion, and I want to conclude with my story about the African lion. And the African lion is talking and challenging the Asian tiger in 60 years in this century, and saying that I am the African lion. I have been asleep in the forest of the Congo, and you have danced for too long alone on the stage. The European bear retreated to the poles long time ago. American panda is on the retreat. But I am now awake as the African lion. I am bounded by the mighty Kilimanjaro to the east and Mount Kenya, the Atlas Mountains to the west, the Congo River in the middle, the Nile, the Niger, the Zambezi, the Limpopo, and I am sitting on the African gold, African bauxite, African copper, African diamonds, and I have an African oil. And I have the knowledge and capacity to transform all this wealth into better living standards for my people of Africa and claim the 21st century as truly African century. Thank you.
Thank you. Votre Excellence Moussa Faki, 30 secondes sur what will happen in the next 60 years. Votre rêve, votre vision.
Une Afrique intégrée est possible. Une Afrique prospère est possible. Une Afrique en paix est possible. Tout dépendra de nous et de nous seulement. Avoir de la vision, avoir de la foi et agir. Le leadership est fondamental. Le leadership, c'est par l'exemple. Vous ne pouvez pas convaincre si vous ne vous appliquez pas ce que vous demandez aux autres à vous-même. Et c'est ça qui fait la différence.
Merci. Président Tshisekedi.
Bien, vous avez entendu ce que le président Faki a dit tout à l'heure, 50 milliards qui fouillent l'Afrique à cause de la corruption. C'est un fléau. Quand on pense que l'Afrique a besoin de 60 milliards par an pour atteindre son développement, c'est un fléau. Donc nous devons tout mettre en œuvre pour lutter contre la corruption, d'une part. Ensuite, c'est vrai qu'aujourd'hui, il n'y a plus de guerre entre États africains, mais il y a des conflits à l'intérieur des États africains, et des conflits bien souvent tribaux, et qui sont très souvent encore liés à la pauvreté. Luttons contre la pauvreté, favorisons ou investissons dans l'autonomisation de la femme et la promotion de la jeunesse. L'Afrique vaincra, j'en suis convaincu.
Merci. President Kagame.
Let me start by, first of all, thanking the panelists and the organizers of this festival, Ideas Festival. Thank you, NMG, Nation Media Group. We want to be thankful to His Highness the Aga Khan, but Madam Vera Songwe, Honorable Raila Odinga, His Excellency President Tshisekedi, His Excellency Musa, the African Union Commission Chair, and yourself, moderator, and the audience. I wanted to be thankful that you gave us the honor of hosting you in our country, in our capital, and to also participate with you in discussing the ideas that can take our continent places where the continent should be. I want to thank you very much. And for the question, I think I borrow from what Vera said for avoiding the risk of being misunderstood. Earlier, people, when they see 60 years, the immediate thing that comes to their mind is that they want to be there at that time. So we can break it into 20 years, and by the time we find ourselves covering 60 years. And in any case, where we want to see the continent, many things have been said by colleagues. It's about prosperity, it's about good governance, by the way, which also addresses to a great extent the problem of corruption, which is real, that we must address, no question about that, because what we lose through corruption is a lot, and the figures have been given. So good governance is an issue, and then, of course, continuing to invest in our people, especially our young people, so that they carry this continent to the greater heights that where it should be. And one of the things, I won't keep talking about going to the moon or to Mars or beyond. I think since most people think we want to be here in the next 60 years, which might be true, maybe we need to be thinking of how we can actually ensure that we are there in the next 60 years. Through science, technology, there are many advances in science. When people talk about artificial intelligence and the big data on which to, that playing into the big data, we might find some hidden solutions about how we can double life expectancy of a human being. We are used to going up to 100 and stopping there, but we can go beyond that. 120 may be a common thing, and then 150 and so on. So anyway, I wish you all the best, and let's work together for delivering Africa to a better place in the next 10 years, 20, 30, 60. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Join me in thanking the panel for their great contributions. Let me return now the floor to Nozipo, who will lead us out. Thank you very much to the panel.